This is the show that helps you know what to quit, what to keep, and what to question. Welcome to the QuitCast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the QuitCast. We are taking a tiny bit of a break from our normal scheduled programming where we are going through the Why Am I Not Selling? And we're going to talk a little bit about the current state of affairs in writerdom, which any of you who are writers right now in August of 2021, and potentially even just humans right now in August of 2021, realize that you're hearing a lot more of, I'm tired. I just don't know what to do about this, right? And so I wanted to approach this question from a little bit of a strengths perspective today, because I feel like we don't talk about this enough. We talk about it a lot in our one-on-one coaching, of course, because when you're individually sitting across from us, it's easy for us to address these things. But in general, I tend not to talk about it a lot because, of course, it's topical, right? Like it's going to come and go. And so we try not to talk about the pandemic a lot. In fact, we call it the pand bear, so that we don't really have to talk about it. And that, as we have noticed lately, is becoming even that is becoming hard. And so I just want to talk about those of you who have felt tired, why that's happening. And I know it's not going to be rocket science for most of us, but I want to talk specifically about why it's happening, or why we feel like it's happening now, maybe more than ever, and what we can do about that specifically as writers. And again, we're going to take the strengths tactic a little bit because, and hopefully if you haven't taken strengths before, the strengths test before, this will still make sense to you because it's just general personality stuff. But I always have to start off by saying, of course, we are not all the same. And I don't just mean that we are different ages and different socioeconomic backgrounds and different cultures and different ethnicities. I literally mean in our brains, our personalities are not the same as each other. So even when there are things that I may appear to have in common with someone, like we're both writers, and so it would seem like, well, writers do this, or we all approach things the same way. One of the hallmarks of the Better Faster Academy is that we acknowledge that we don't approach things the same way, even when we appear to on the outside be similar, even when we appear to maybe even preferentially or in other areas be similar, there still are things that separate us from each other, that we have different whys. And again, when I talk about why, I'm not talking about purpose-driven why. I'm talking about causal why. Why is this happening? If you listen to our old introduction to the QuitCast, we used to say, anyone can tell you what works for them, and they can say this might not work for you, but they can't tell you why. I can tell you why. And that is sort of the core of what we do at the QuitCast, is try to understand why things happen. It's why we question the premise of things so much. It's why again, I use the word why all the time, but it's why we utilize Strengths Finder and other personality metrics so often, is because that is a why behind why we handle things different. And everyone handles things so differently that it does require some very individualized or customized answers. So let's talk about the why behind why we are tired. From a personality perspective, especially those of us who are high in relationship building strengths, the blue strengths. These are empathy, includer, adaptability, positivity, developer, harmony, individualization. So things like that, like those blue people driven, people first strengths. So those of us who are wired with any of those blue people driven, people first strengths have a tendency to be people first, which means that when there's a person in front of me who needs something, or when I see a person who has a particular emotion, sometimes I can feel those emotions, but that tends to be what drives a lot of what I do. When I'm a blue strength driven person, it means that I have a shortcut into finding my motivations, because often my motivations are tied up in either the benefit to other people or in finding a way to make it matter to other people. And that's a shortcut to figure out how to motivate myself, because surprise, surprise, not everybody's internally motivated. It's just not the way the world is. And not everyone should be internally motivated. Some of us are externally motivated by purpose, like on purpose, and causally externally motivated. And so utilizing that rather than, trying to change it is going to be better, because you're going to have more success just utilizing it. But the downside of that external motivation is that often we are more affected when other people are affected. We tend to not be able to close off the boxes in our head quite as quickly as people who are not blue strength dominant, or who are not high in input, which is a thinking strength. Or, some of the woo potentially communication sometimes can have this as well, but the people first strengths. So if I am a people first person, even if I don't want to be or don't intend to be, and this is the other piece, is that I can't always control how my brain works. Not every decision that I make is equally up for grabs. I can't always just decide, well, I'm not going to care today how other people feel if I'm a top 5 empathy, because that's not likely to happen. Doesn't mean I won't reach a point where I don't care how people feel. Like that's a downside of empathy, right? So if I am wired with blue strengths, it is more likely that the more conflict and strife, the more tension and difficulty, even outside of the pandemic, even with any other thing, right? Like any conflict or tension between people, when I'm blue strength driven, means that affects me somehow. It usually affects me because I'm wired to do something about it. So either I'm wired to help people process their emotions, to help them come to a growth perspective, to connect people, to just be helpful in general, to bring peace to places, right? There are all these things that I might be wired for. And when I have that wiring, I can't just change it because it's inconvenient, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. And this is why, and you hear me, those of you who are in our Facebook groups or who are on the Patreon, you hear me saying a lot, blue people, please stay off social media. Please get away from the sources, the high input, high context people. Please get away from the sources where the derailing information is coming from, because you can't change the way everyone is feeling. Like you can't, like we're, as blue people, we are meant to try to affect some kind of a change with those blue strengths. And that change might just be helping people feel understood, or helping people feel their emotions, or bringing peace, or making things easier for people, right? Like there are small changes and then there are big changes. The things that are going wrong right now are very big change dominant, like they're very big cause dominant. And because everyone sort of shares the same big cause and everybody reacts to it a little bit differently, right? Like not everyone is frustrated or in pain about the same things. And there's a lot of fear going around everywhere from all directions. And that tends to make blue strengths suffer a lot. So the more blue strength dominant I am, the more I need to acknowledge that other people's emotions are going to affect me. So if I'm not able to isolate myself from the emotions that are affecting me, then I'm going to be draining my energy pennies at a faster rate. And if you haven't heard of our energy pennies discussion before, I'll put a link in the show notes to the energy pennies video that we did recently. So you can see that. We did it this season in season 3, so that you can see that, because I do think it's important to understand that our energy pennies don't always get drained at the same speed. So let's say when everything is fine, copacetic, everything in the larger world is fine, everything in my individual world is fine, all of my writing friends are fine, everything's fine, everyone's good, then I get drained at a normal rate of energy pennies. Let's just call it a 1-to-1 ratio, right? Like one task costs me one amount, and it's the same amount every time I do that task in general. The more stressed out I get, so as an empathy, the more I'm feeling everybody's emotions. As a harmony, the more I'm trying to restore harmonic balance. As a developer, the more I'm trying to get people to see the potential in themselves, or in groups, or in organizations. As an adaptability, the more I'm trying to respond to everyone, the more I'm trying to make everyone de-stress and be okay, right? my own stress level goes up the more that I have to concentrate on just the baseline of everyone's emotions being handled, right? So when everyone's stress level goes up, my stress level naturally goes up, even without me wanting it to. And that means that I'm now burning energy in a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 ratio. So the one task that used to take me 1 penny to do now takes me 2, 3, 4, 5 pennies to do. We're talking like, I love the way that Jess talks about this. She says the nickel, the dime, the quarter, right? Like what am I dropping these energy pennies? How quickly am I dropping these things? So let's say getting up out of bed used to be a 1 penny exercise and now it's a dime exercise. Well, that means that it takes me more energy just to get through the day because I'm dealing with the compensation for all of this stress, and it is causing me issues in how I'm able to execute the farther I get down into the day because I just don't have unlimited energy pennies to spend. And so what happens is when I am no longer able to function at the same level that I used to be, and some of us have gone back and forth in normal functioning throughout the entire pandemic, sometimes have been more difficult than others for some of us, especially again, the blue strength dominant people. And we'll talk about other strengths groups in just a second. But the blue strength specifically, because it's the emotions are so high, tensions are running high, everyone is stressed out. And if you're not, that's okay. Like not every single person in humanity is stressed out, but it's a rare person who isn't feeling more stressed now than they normally would. So just the understanding that it's normal for me to be more tired when I'm not doing anything different than I've always done. It's super, super important to normalize that, because when we think that it's abnormal, we try to fix it. And the reality is there isn't a lot we can do to fix how much energy it takes us to do things right now. What we can do, not overcommit ourselves, not overtax ourselves, not expect things that can't happen because we just don't have the energy pennies to do it. And we might have to pull back on our expectations of ourselves. We might not be able to get the same amount of work done that we've always gotten done, especially if you think about the way that a lot of us are wired with some of the anticipation strengths, the high strategic, the high futuristic, things like that. We are wired to anticipate. And so every time something changes, we're anticipating like, when is this going to be done? What are we going to do? How are we going to plan for this? And then every single time we have to re-anticipate because things change. So the lower your adaptability, the lower your ranger, the higher your futuristic or strategic, the less good or of an environment a pandemic is for you. It's not great for anybody, but there are less good personalities for handling these things. And specifically those of us who tend to like to cast forward and plan had been casting forward to a time when everything was done and everything was handled and everything was safe. And then it didn't happen. And now we're frustrated. And the one thing we can't let ourselves do is get so caught up in that frustration that we're not able to reset and reorient ourselves, because the bottom line is there's nothing any of us can do about this, and we really need to have some gentleness with the way that we're handling it, because some of us are just not adjusting well, but we're expecting ourselves to adjust well. So what I want to see us do then is be kind, do as much energy penny producing activity as you can, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And this isn't just about like, hey, put that work off, right? Because some of what we're going to talk about in a second is about execution strengths, and that may not work. Like me putting work off may not actually help if I'm an execution driven person. But I want to talk to the blue strengths people here just for a second. It is imperative for the blue strength people that we do as much to cordon ourselves off from stress as possible, because we're already going to be feeling everybody else's stress, and we're already feeling the stress and the stress and the stress past like before time, right? Like it feels like we're all just weighed down a lot with this. And if any of you saw there was a great Awkward Yeti cartoon a couple of weeks ago where the heart was carrying a whole bunch of stuff and they kept adding things to it, right? And then all of a sudden there was a lip in the sidewalk that they were coming to, and they kept getting burdened down farther and farther and farther. And all the things that were getting added were like normal trauma, like normal problems, and then it was like pandemic on top of that, and world in peril on top of that, and etc., like conflict on top of that. And then it was like one little fly landed on it in the last one, and the heart just collapses crying, because it feels like just making that one little 1-inch step up is too much, and it's because it's carrying everything. And that's how the Blue Strength people need to think about the way that they are right now, is just to make sure if you feel like you are carrying everything, don't also expect the same level of production and everything else from yourself that you have been in years past. Because the bottom line is, it's not a 1-to-1 energy penny ratio to task ratio anymore. For almost none of us is it that way. Almost all of us have 1.52 or higher to 1 task like energy penny ratios when we get into stress like this. It's so imperative that we take care of ourselves in times of high stress, because the cortisol, the effect of stress on us biologically, is so dangerous. Like, for multitudes of reasons, we need to do everything we can do to try to bring some comfort and solidarity and peace to ourselves. And if that means the only way I can do it is to literally turn everything and everyone off so that I just can't see it, then that's what I need to do. It's not irresponsible. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what anyone says. It is not irresponsible for you to turn the world off. We existed for so long being able to turn the world off. And now that we have 24/7, 365, we feel like because it's there, we can't turn it off. You can turn it off. You are not responsible for the world. You need to turn it off if it's costing you too much, because we all need to be able to function through the rest of this. And we need to be able to come out on the other side without doing a lot of damage to ourselves and each other, if at all possible. So as much as we can, staying connected like emotionally to each other is important, but it's not important to stay as connected as we were before, because we are weighing ourselves collectively down, and we're making the ratio of energy pennies to tasks go up so significantly that it is going to burn us out. And a lot of us are experiencing sort of a collective mini burnout with everything, right? Like, a lot of us have been very vigilant about everything for 18 months plus. And we really need to take a break from that level. And if that means we're going to shut everything down and not be as connected and not be as available, then that's what it means, because we've got to take care of ourselves and take care of our sanity. And those of us who are taking care of everyone else and letting everyone else's weight be on our shoulders, we really need to put the weight down. For our own good and our own health benefit over the long term. And so some of us need to see coaches. Some of us need to see therapists. Some of us need to see our family or our people or whatever we can do, and anything we can do, even if it's not ideal. So I'm going to talk just primarily to the strategic ideation, individualization type people right now. It is dangerous to have that kind of an ideal, maximize your significance competition. It's dangerous to have that level of idealism that comes with those strengths, with the strategic, with the maximizer, with an ideation. When you have those idealism strengths, they create a tension and when you settle for things. Like when something doesn't come out the way that you want it to. And so I'll say, well, I can't see my family right now. That's the ideal. And so I'm not going to do anything. It's that black and white thinking, right? Like we really have to deconstruct that. It would be better to see people on Zoom than to not see anyone at all, in terms of like for your mental health, if that's what you need, if you're the kind of person who needs to get connections right now. it is so tempting to black and white think with those strengths that have that idealism tendency, where I say, well, I can't go to the conference, so I'm not going to do anything. Or I can't, be in a beach house with my friends, so I'm not going to do anything. That is so dangerous when it comes to like high stress level times, because our desire for black and white thinking increases when our stress goes up. So if you have those idealism strengths, that danger is very real in terms of cutting off things that would be perfectly viable or that would potentially produce energy pennies, because they are not going to be able to produce the most and best, right? Like that idealistic level. So we have to be super, super conscious about the way that our idealism strengths are making us act against our own best interests, because we can't get that thing that we really want right now. We can't get that ideal. And that's just kind of advice in general for those idealism strengths. We have to be cautious about how our black and white thinking causes us to bypass what would otherwise be a perfectly good plan, because it's not the best plan. So being cautious about that. I want to say just a quick word to the people who are purple dominant, executing strength dominant right now, because especially if you are high achiever or high focus, probably arrangers are going to be like this at least a little bit, and potentially responsibilities. Although because responsibility trends so much with blue strengths as well, I wouldn't say that you're purple dominant with just a high responsibility. So I want to talk to the clusters of purples, especially again, the high achievers. When you are purple dominant or you have clusters of purples, it means that hard work tends to refresh you and it tends to give you energy pennies. So I'm talking when I say like, hey, maybe you need a break, maybe you need to pull back, maybe you need to think about reorientation. That's for people whose like primary method of refilling is not hard work. And that's not everyone. Like the majority of people are not wired this way. And so I really want to say, though, to the high achievers, it's possible that it's actually better for you right now if you just put your head down and work and forget about everything else, because it's going to be easier for you to segment unless you're purple blue, right? Like if you're blue, if you have blue dominant strengths, especially that empathy, harmony, connectedness, individualization, developer, adaptability, it's going to be really, really hard if you have blues as well, to just stay as connected as you were, because of the ratio. The ratio really does go up with the blue strengths. But if you are achiever dominant, achiever focus, achiever discipline, focus, achiever discipline, right? Like that type of person, it's so much better for you when you can put the blinders on, sink down into the book, and just get the work done and not think about what's going on externally. And the more you can do to make it easy for yourself to get down into that place, the better. The presenting yourself with the option of doing that kind of work is going to be much better. And I would also still, but you'll naturally do this, right? I would also still stay away from everything. Like in general, right now, there is not a lot of benefit in being places where you can at any time get derailed. And so if there's any way to give yourself the tunnel vision or the blinders and cut things out and stop going to the clubhouse rooms that you're going to that are derailing you, stop going on the social media that's derailing, right? Like even good things in a time can be bad things in a different time. So it's really important to evaluate the things you're doing that are keeping you from feeling sane and safe really right now. Because the more we can do to lower the need for our brain to produce adrenaline or stress hormones, the more it's better for us right now. Because we've just been swimming in a cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline for about 18 months, and it is dangerous long term for that. So we want to do as much as we can. And it's so funny. I have to show you this. I do something very, very small every time I pass this particular corner of my office. And I use this head massager. Oh my goodness. Like literally even just using it for a second just makes me feel so much less tense. so much less tense. Anything we can do to feel less tense, less stress, anything we can do right now, I would do it. And this is a very small way, but it doesn't have to be a lot. It's more like if you think about when tension ratchets up in us, right? If I go on a social media and see something that makes me tense, then I need that de-stress. I need that soothing or calming to be able to settle myself back down sometimes, even when I am not aware of it. And maybe the hardest part is when it's not conscious that my shoulders are raising, right? So everybody relax your shoulders and take a deep breath, or let the breath out that you've been holding, or massage your scalp or whatever you're going to do. But the small ways that we can relieve tension as well are super, super important. um, Relationships, intimacy, whatever we can do to relieve tension, I think we need to do that, because collectively we are just getting higher and higher shoulders, like as a human race right now. And we just need everybody to feel a little bit of a relax of pressure. And that is not going to happen because of the external circumstances for a while, and who knows how long for. So we have to be able to find ways to help ourselves relax and calm ourselves and de-stress, even if it's very, very tiny and it doesn't actually solve the larger problem. Because those of you who are high restorative, high connectedness, high strategic, high context, the larger problem is not getting solved. And I mean larger in the global context. Like, even if the pandemic goes away, we're still the people who went through this together and have not been connected to each other and have not been particularly happy to be connected to each other. And that is going to cause stress and tension naturally. And that affects the way we work so much. Because it's not that shutting down social media means that you forget that it happens. You don't forget it. It's just that it's not in front of you in the moment. And so you don't think about it. And then when you do think about it again, you get flooded by all that stuff again, right? It's just that we want to do as much as possible in the day to keep ourselves from being flooded by that level of stress. And if there's anything you can do to minimize that, I would, especially those of us who are able to write early in the day and can just not look at things and then get to our writing and then finish it and feel more productive for the day, or our plotting or editing or world building or whatever we're doing, right? Like, everybody's got a different process. But it's so important for those of us who are purple dominant to be able to do the work. So the more you're getting derailed by things outside, the more we need to shut those things down and close them off and just not allow them in front of our eyeballs. There's so much stress that happens. And again, if you have not watched the videos that we've done in the past about some of these QTPs or the open and closed systems, or some of the productivity stuff, right, where we talk about why our subconscious decisions are so important, it's because so much of what we do, we don't know we're doing. We don't have control over, and we don't understand what's really happening because it's just happening by habit. It's happening by rote, and we don't get it. So we just have to be really, really conscious about it. If you don't do anything else, if you've been really stressed out, the first thing sometimes is that we really do need to have emotions about it. We need to get frustrated. We need to cry. Maybe we need to, blow off steam or do something, right? Like, be safe. Please don't hurt anyone. But we definitely might need to do some things that are going to relieve the sort of global tension inside of ourselves. Let's call it like our inner universal tension, right? And the other pieces, so that's sort of like the purple strengths. And if you think about yellow and blue as one, they have a lot of overlap. A lot of that advice is going to be the same. The green strengths, though, because they are so information driven and curiosity driven, this is where we really reach a need to find something else to learn about or input about, to find a way to shut off the finding of information about things that are stressing us out. And that might mean not going on social media channels in the mornings or maybe all day long, or taking a fast from it. It might mean making some hard choices about our health. It might mean not being in front of the computer so much. It might mean finding a new hobby, right? Like we talked about this summer. I've never crocheted a sweater before. So, or a jumper, as my friend Steph says, I've never crocheted one of those before. So I'm going to try that this year because I need to spend less time mindlessly scrolling social media because it stresses my connectedness out so much to see how disconnected we all are from each other. And that stresses out my connectedness. And so I know I need to not look at it. It is not my job to fix the world. It's not my job to be aware of every single thing that goes on. Of course, everyone else thinks it is everybody's job to be aware of everything, but it's just not good for us. It's not good for our stress levels. It's not good for our sanity. So, okay. Now that we've kind of talked through what is going on, right? The way that emotions can affect our blue strengths, the way that information can trigger our green strengths, the way that a lack of work or enforced rest can trigger our blue strengths and potentially our yellow strengths as well, right? Because we do have competition, command, significance, communication, which trend very much like blue strengths in terms of how we accomplish things. And so they can feel very purple in a lot of ways. And then you have the communication, the woo, which trend a little bit more like blue in terms of being relationship dominant or people first. And so the way people are around us is going to stress us out. But here's where we need to land. We have to be willing to do small things to make small progress because we've been slowly sliding downhill, right? Like this is the slide. This is how burnout happens. You don't just come to the edge and I was fine and then have a cliff. It's gradual. It's very gradual. But the problem is we don't notice it until we are almost at the bottom. And some of us are so burned out on all of the conflict and all of the pandemic and all of everything and everyone's emotions and everyone's yelling about everything. Some of us are so burned out on that it's affecting how we feel personally. And it's affecting our ability to get into the manuscript as well. And I'm not primarily interested with the productivity piece of this discussion right now, even though that is definitely why some of us are going to watch this. But I'm primarily interested in the well-being part of this, because this pandemic, no matter how tired we all are of it, no matter how frustrated we are of hearing the word COVID, it is not going away just because we're frustrated with it. And our frustration is literally essential pain. When I get frustrated by something because it's not changing, the only choice for me is to change myself. I cannot change that thing. I can't change the way anyone else reacts about it. I can't change the way anyone else handles it. I cannot change the world. I cannot change other people. It is not my responsibility. It is not even possible. The ability for us to affect change is just not happening on that level. And we're too far into this now at this point. Everyone is operating on inertia. So we need to acknowledge, I can't change the fact that this is happening. We were just having this conversation with a bunch of futuristic writers this week. I can't not plan anymore. Like I've gone through 18 months trying not to plan because I don't know what the future holds. I can't not plan anymore as a futuristic. I got to plan for stuff. And one of my futuristic clients put it really well this week. She said, it may not be this winter, it may not be next winter, but it's going to be some winter that I'm going to do this trip. And so she planned for the trip, right? And that's perfect. I may not be able to move this fall. It may not be next fall. It may not be next spring, whatever, right? Like I may not be able to execute this in exactly the time that I want to, but I am willing to not let the inability to see the future keep me from planning and anticipating anymore, because I just need to be able to exercise that part of myself. So I'm going to always caveat everything, or contingency plan for those of us who are strategic. I'm always going to contingency plan or caveat, but I am not going to not plan. I'm not going to not anticipate, because that waiting has caused me no amount of stress. And it feels so much better to just go ahead and plan and then contingency. So I always know now that we've had this panda bear experience that I may not be able to predict the future, but I can still plan for it. And so that is just kind of a side note for how the futuristic strategics in the group are going to need to start thinking about having some semblance of normalcy again. I can't continue to be frustrated about something and not change my own attitude about it. I just can't, we can't afford that anymore. And I've been not confronting that attitude in the podcast specifically because it feels really topical. But at this point, it's been months of having the same conversations and coaching with a lot of different people and not feeling like there's a general sense of antidote for this, right? Like it's not getting better. It's not getting easier. We need to start accepting. And I get that we're tired, but being tired of it isn't actually going to help us. Like it's not that feeling, right? That feeling of like, I want to not hear about it anymore. That's not going to happen. So I need to just be okay with it, to acknowledge that we're going to have to talk about this, to acknowledge that I'm going to have to maybe not be on social media. Maybe I'm not going to be able to listen to the podcast that I've been listening to. Maybe I'm not going to be able to whatever it is, because I need to create some small steps for myself to make more energy pennies instead of continue to have the 2-to-1 ratio drain. And it is so important to have solidarity with each other, to be able to express our emotions and be frustrated. So important. And also, if we find ourselves continuing to say the same thing, then it's us that has to change and not because the situation isn't going anywhere. And I am not trying to be fatalistic. I'm as positive as I can possibly be about this. I do think that it's going to get better. But it's not getting better anytime soon. So either we need to learn how to deal around it and start shutting stuff off, or we need to work again, if we're purples, or we need to do like small steps of things that will help to keep our strengths happy. Think about the things that make your strengths happy and do some of those things every day. So if you just take your top 10 and think of ways that my top 10 could make me happy, what could I potentially do every day that would make one of my top 10 happy? And then do that thing. And also, again, blue strength people, please stay away from everyone else's emotions because you can't help it. You can't help being affected. And it's a dive bomb, right? You can never predict when it's going to happen. And sometimes it's safe and sometimes it isn't. So then we want to be like, oh, it's fine. And then I can't write for 3 days because I went on Facebook in the morning, right? So just be cautious about that. I am probably going to do a QuitCast about marketing with blue strengths here. We have a Market Better Faster class that we are going to launch in the fall. Crystal and I are going to teach that. We have a Ads for Intuitive Authors class that is almost full for September. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, I'll put a link in the show notes to that. And we would love to have you. It has been a great cohort that we've had in August, and the feedback that we're getting from people has been fantastic. So I'm really excited to have another group to take through this Ads for Intuitive Authors. And then, like I said, we're going to do a Market Better Faster class coming up in October. Right now, we have both our Write Better Faster 101 and our Write Better Faster 201 classes starting in September. We have strengths coaching that's ongoing, and another cohort starts on Monday, and well, all the things, right? There's all the things happening. So if you need help, you need support, please reach out to us. You can come on our Patreon. We have coaching available on our Patreon to ask questions. You can comment here below. You can come and sign up for one of our classes or sign up for one of our coaching cohorts. It's whatever you need. Whatever you need, we will help. Just don't do this alone. It's a lot to do something like a pandemic and to rely only on yourself for this. Don't do this alone. Come and find us and be connected to other people who need this connection to survive through this. And so we are happy to be able to provide that, even if all you do is come on the Patreon and write in our co-working space, which we call the office. please come and do whatever you can to support yourself. It's worth it. You're worth it. So, okay. I will see you all next week when we're going to talk about marketing with Blue Strengths. And I hope everybody has a great day. And we will have next week also, we have an author success archetypes update, which is going to come on the heels of some stuff on the newsletter and on the Patreon. So if you really want to be in the know, make sure you join the Patreon. We always announce things first there. And that's patreon.com/Becca Syme. All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope that you all do something to produce energy pennies today. I hope to see you all next week when we talk about marketing with Blue Strengths. All right. Bye, everyone.